And I'm wondering, like, why am I doing this? Nobody asked for this. Does anybody even care? This is an origami paper crane. I'm going to knit this. This book describes advanced techniques for machine knitting, including how to mix sections of stockinette and ribbing in order to make fabric that wants to curl in specific ways. And the origami paper crane is in this book, right here. But there are no instructions for how to make this. It's left as an exercise to the reader. Well, I'm the reader, and I'm going to perform this exercise. I'm actually taking inspiration from multiple projects in this book. This is the other one. This is a knit vase. And this is yet another image with no description of how to actually make it. But the panels are double bed jacquard, which will work well with the ribbing and stockinette technique that I want to do to create the folds for the paper crane. Y'all know I'm an engineer, so I'm not just going to make one of these. In fact, the paper crane is almost a byproduct of the part that I actually want to do, which is building a process to turn any arbitrary origami shape into the kind of thing that you can knit, and to automate that process as much as possible. So I'm going to break this down to a couple different topics. First, there's the origami. I need to figure out which folds are actually important and turn that into an image. And then comes the software. I need to take that image and translate it to a chart with enough information that a human knows how to follow it, because I'm working with a domestic knitting machine, not an industrial one. And also size it to any given number of stitches and rows, and also whatever gauge you're working with. And third, the knitting. I need to make sure that what I want to do is even possible with double bed jacquard, and make sure that I know what the limitations are so I can feed that back into the rest of this process. I'm working with my Brother 910 vintage standard gauge domestic knitting machine. It is older than I am. I have retrofitted it with AYAB, which is open source hardware and software that lets me control it from my computer. I contribute to the software. I have a bunch of videos. There'll be links in the description. Working with a few colors of Tam crystal yarn. This is a mix of polyamide and acrylic. And it's a good weight for double bed jacquard on this machine. You generally need lighter weight yarns for this kind of thing. I'll put a link to where I get this in the description. The book talks about using thermoplastic yarns for this kind of thing. Thermoplastic yarns are yarns that will shrink and turn into like hard plastic when you heat them up. And I looked at that, but I would have to special order them from Italy in large quantities. So this is my best option with the resources available to me at this point. And I picked up some spray starch, and we'll see if that helps stiffen the fabric. And finally, I have a whole second project here. This project with the crane is going to be a lot of work and a lot of thinking, and I know I'm going to get to points where I get stuck. I need to just like let it sit for a while and like solidify in the back of my mind. So I have another project here that's very mechanical and very little thinking to like let that happen. And I don't know what order these are going to come out in. I suspect this one will come out first, so I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, let's get started with the swatching, because if what I want to do is not possible with double bed jacquard, we'll have to make some decisions. Okay, let's talk about double bed jacquard. These are a few samples I've already knit. Double bed jacquard is a method for doing color work that doesn't have any floats, because the floats get knit into the bottom bed. This section is knit on the top bed, and this side is knit on the bottom bed. The top bed is smart. It can do patterning, it can select needles so that we get different colors. The bottom bed is dumb. It can only do this kind of bird's eye back thing. And there are a couple different ways to do double bed jacquard. You don't have to do this bird's eye back thing. There are other things you can do with the back of the fabric. But let's talk about how you do the bird's eye back, because it is important here. I've decoupled my carriages for now, but the way that we handled bird's eye back for the bottom bed is with these buttons here. See this like high, low thing? We call these Lili because it looks like L-I-L-I. But we changed these levers to here. There's one on the other side because we can change it in different directions. And then there's a switch on the bottom that goes to the middle. So then when we pass the bottom carriage over, it's only selecting every other needle. And it's only going to knit every other needle. And it'll do this in both directions because we have selected the appropriate settings on the carriage. So from left to right on the first pass, we get every other needle, and then on the way back, we get the needles that didn't knit on the way forward. So it winds up being one row knit on the back for every 2 passes of the carriage. But because the bottom carriage is dumb, we need a very specific orientation of needles. So you see on the bottom bed, every other needle is marked with this horizontal line. That's so we can tell if it's an odd needle or an even needle. And in order to get the bottom bird's eye backing knit correctly, we need to have an even number of needles selected. So it's really easy to see, like, if you start on a horizontal line, you need to end on an empty. So then we have an even number of needles. And we have to do this because the lily buttons select the second needle and then every other needle after that. And then on the way back, it selects the second needle and every other needle back after that. So on the way to the right, we get needles 2 and 4. And then on the way to the left, we get needles 1 and 3. So 2 and 4 and 1 and 3 is all of the needles. But if we have an odd number of needles, on the way to the right, we get 2 and 4 again. And then on the way to the left, we get 2 and 4 again because it's selecting the second needle to begin with. And then we don't wind up knitting all of the needles if there's an odd number of needles in this row. So here's an example chart from the book to make this chevron design. The blue are stitches knit on the top bed, and the red are stitches knit on the bottom bed. And the way that you do this is by transferring them back and forth and like pulling needles out of work. But the problem with doing this in double bed jacquard is that any contiguous section of needles that are going to be on the bottom bed, the gray here is knit on both the top and the bottom bed, but any contiguous section, so anything that is either gray or blue, any contiguous section of this has to be an even number of needles, which makes the math a lot more complicated. Because when we want to get these diagonals, we have to move them in a very specific way so that this always stays an even number of needles. And that's really tricky. Here's a sample that I've already knit. I took 2 needles from the bottom bed and transferred the stitches to the top to give us this section here that's only knit on the top bed. And you can see it creates floats on the back, but the pattern still stays consistent on the front, and that's what we want. And then the fabric really just wants to fold in half. I had an even number of needles on the bottom bed to begin with, just for the cast on, and then I had to take 2 of them out of work to make sure both sections on either side of the fold would have an even number of needles. And this gets more complicated. So this is 4 needles out of work. This is 2 needles out of work. This is 4 needles out of work. Because while it is helpful in some situations to model origami paper as truly two-dimensional with no thickness, that is not actually the case. There is some thickness to it and some tolerances you need to build into the folds if you want a really neat final piece. And of course, the knit fabric is a lot thicker than paper. So when we have one fold that's going to be over another fold, the crease needs to be wider. Like, it needs to have more tolerance for whatever's underneath it. So I started off testing like 2 is enough to get this to fold nicely in half. And then 4 is enough to tuck 2 inside of it. So that when we have a piece that's folded over another piece, it's not going to be funky. But looking at the folds in my origami paper crane, none of them are like perfectly vertical like this. A lot of them go at an angle. In fact, I think all of them go at an angle. So we need to be able to tolerate that. But, oh my God, this is where it gets complicated. Here's a piece that I started working on. In order to keep the ratios correct, like an even number on one side of the fold and an even number on the other side of the fold, we have to move the crease over by 2 needles each time. Because if we move it over by 1 needle, we wind up with an odd number, and then an even number, and an even number, and an odd number, and an odd number, and then our bird's eye backing gets messed up. So I'm going to have to build this into my image generation at the end. I'll have to post-process the image so that all of my contiguous sections that are on the bottom bed are knit correctly so that the bird's eye backing comes out right. And that's going to lead to like some weird diagonals, and we'll just have to deal with that. All right, let me show you how this works on the machine. Okay, I'm cast onto waste yarn, and I have an even number of needles on the bottom bed and an odd number on the top, because you want your outside needles to be on the top bed. And then the cast on is the same as a normal cast on for ribbing, so I'm going to tension 0, pick up my black yarn, and then we do 1 pass, and then tension to 1, circular knitting, 2 passes, and then my final tension, cancel the circular knitting, final pass. Okay, and I want to do a diagonal across this whole piece, so I'm going to set it up here. And in order to keep an even number of needles in this contiguous section on the bottom, I need to transfer 4. Well, an even number, because an even number minus an even number is an even number. And because I need to move over by 2 each time I iterate, I want more than 2 in my angled section so that it doesn't wind up like being a step function of discrete holes. I want it to be like contiguous. So let me get set up for double edged card. Pattern set up on my computer, and then the first thing we're going to do is set this up for Lily. So all of these go there. Okay. KC2. We're initialized, and then no buttons on the top carriage yet. First pass is normal. There we go, and then part buttons. And I do 2 rows and then switch colors. And this is where we start to see how the Lily stuff works. So I've done 1 pass with the white, and you can see that I have white on every other needle, and then the second pass is going to be white on every needle. So that's how we know it's set up correctly. You gotta be really careful with this changing colors, because sometimes they've come out of the feeder. Okay. Okay, I just knit 4 rows because 2 passes of the carriage is 1 row. And now I want to start shifting this diagonal over as we knit. So I'm gonna transfer 2 more needles up. The fold is going to be wherever the needles are out of work on the bottom bed. And then I need to reset these to what they would be if they were selected by the machine. And then I'm going to bring in 2 needles from the outside edge. And I don't need to put yarn on these. I can just leave them there and they will knit next time I bring the carriage through. Okay, I've already changed colors. Yes. And now it's time to do all this again. So these 2 are going up. Those go out of work, and then I bring 2 more up over here. And then we reset the needles. All right, I'm gonna do the rest of this off camera and then show you how I'm finishing this off. Okay, we're done. I have transferred the out of work needles all the way across, and now we have this gap here, so there should be a diagonal through this piece that I'll want to fold nicely. Now to finish this, I have finally learned how to use my transfer carriage because I'm doing so much swatching in double jacquard. I don't want to finish this by hand. I want to automate this as much as possible. So let me show you how this works. So first I need to knit 1 last row at a looser tension. The manual recommends tension 4. I'm going to cancel all of my stuff. So we're just back to plain knitting. Okay, and 1 last row. And now to get this to transfer, it has a diagram on the thing, but it's kind of hard to understand, so let me explain. So we are going to, so the lever on the bottom is up so that we only are going to knit needles that are selected. And I'm going to select every other needle and push them up so that the loop is not past the latch, but it's just up there. And then run the carriage across. No, first I'm going to open all of these latches. There we go. Carriage across. All right, that did what it was supposed to do. I'm not sure if you can see this, but what this is supposed to do is it transfers the stitch from the bottom bed to the top bed, but not completely. See, it's still on this bottom bed needle, and it's also on the top bed needle, but the latch is closed on the bottom bed needle. So what we can just do is move these down, and they will fall off the bottom bed and wind up on the top bed. And we can't do it all at once. You have to do it in every other needle, So in the second pass, we bring up the needles. Let me get these out of the way. We bring up the needles that were not raised before. There we go. And then you should double check these because some of them don't transfer. Like this one didn't transfer, so I'm going to do that manually. Oh, and these ones didn't either. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's still faster than manually transferring all the needles to the top bed. Okay, everybody else looks good. So I'll just pull these down. And then we have all the needles on the top bed. And now I'm going to finish this with waste yarn and finish it on my linker, which I've also learned how to use for this. Here we go. And look at that. It wants to fold. This is what the back looks like. Okay, let's finish the top edge. I just want to finish this off so it won't unravel, so I'm going to run it through my linker. And to do that, I need to put all of the live loops on the individual needles on this thing, and that's a little tricky, but totally doable. And if this needed to be like a nice cast off or to be stretchy, I wouldn't do this. I'd do it by hand. But I need to make a million swatches in order to test all of this, so we're making life easier. Okay, that's good. And then I have finally figured out how to get this thing off the machine without completely unthreading it. So we're gonna do that. And then it comes off of the linker. We pull it all through. And there we go. We have a finished edge. There is my sample. There's the back. You can see those are the needles that were out of work on the bottom bed, and it absolutely wants to fold. I changed my mind. We're doing this instead. This is a different way of doing the back of double bed jacquard that doesn't have the bird's eye back and doesn't have the limitation of like having the sections that are part of the back be even numbers. So we can do whatever we want, like odd sized things, and it makes the calculations for the charts a lot easier, but it's a lot more work by hand. Well, it's a little more work by hand because every time I change colors, I also need to change carriage settings. So for this technique, we're only knitting one color in the back and not the other color. And it's still creating floats here, and you can kind of see how the top of this is a little janky, but the floats wind up hidden by the backing, so they're not like out and getting caught on stuff. But the way that we do that is we're still knitting one color at a time, but for, let's say, black, we're going to knit normally, and then for white, both flaps go up and we don't knit at all. And I just need to remember to change that carriage setting every row, and then we're good. So I want to run a larger scale test of this kind of thing and show you how it works in actions, but I need to move over to the software for a second to get that done first. Okay, on to the software. So first, I revived the intarsia tool. Y'all were right, it got lost. It got lost in a branch, and I pushed from another branch, And this is my hobby, not my day job, so I can make stupid decisions like pushing to production from an uncommitted branch. But it's back now, so I can use it for this stuff. What I want to do is attempt one of these chevron patterns, and this is a chart for it, but to do it in double bed jacquard to make sure that it's possible, and I can pay attention for long enough to make it all work. So I took this pattern, put together a cut down version of it in GIMP. The chevrons are smaller and the folds are only 3 stitches instead of 4, the way it is in the book. But blue stitches are on the top bed and red stitches are on the bottom bed, and I'm just going to run this through the intarsia tool and try to pay attention to it as I knit. So here's what we're knitting. It's just 1 by 1 grid because anything more complex is going to get lost in the chevrons. And this is really just a test anyway, so it needs to be something. And then I have my other pattern loaded up in the intarsia tool, and it's going to split it out row by row, and I'm going to use the colors to determine how to transfer needles. And then I'm cast on over here, we're doing red and white, and I'm going to do the first couple rows and show you how I changed the carriage settings on the bottom to get the back that I want, and then I'm putting you on time lapse because I'm not going to risk the camera getting in the way of this, because if it gets messed up, it'll be hard to restart. So looking at my chart, a couple of these need to be on the bottom bed, so you need to go down. You need to go down. And you need to go down. Okay, those are out of work. And then we have 10, 11, 12 over here. Okay, that's our starting point. Now let's get knitting. Okay, okay. This is where this starts to get complicated because I'm not sure yet how the row number is going to come out, because it takes 2 passes of the carriage to make 1 row. And my chart is done as if 1 pass of the carriage is 1 row. I think I'm going to work this out as I go, and I'll explain it to you later. That's the best I can do. Okay. Get my buttons selected. So that's 1 row. Back. No. Okay. Oh, fuck. Forgot the carriage settings. Okay, so we're going to call that 1 row. And I want to do all of my manipulation while the carriage is over here, so I don't have to worry about changing settings and the color changes that happen on the other side. So we'll call this row 1. And I'm resetting the row counter. Okay, and I'm already all set up, so I don't need to do anything to advance my chart. Okay, so we're going to knit again. Flaps go down on red. Yes. Okay, this is what I want to do. Yes. Yes. Oh, too much thinking. Yeah, okay. 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 The thinking is hard. Oh my god, the thinking is hard. I need to give this some thought. Okay, let me explain this to the best of my ability. So, we're at row counter 20, which is going to be row 10 in my chart, and I have futzed with the row counter, so that's correct. I'll probably have to do it on the final thing as well. So, we're going to go back and get the next color. Yes, because on row 20, I don't need to do anything. Okay, so I pick up the new color. I put my carriage settings up so the white doesn't knit on the bottom bed, and we come back. Okay, and now we're on row counter 22, which means I'm on row 11 of my chart, and then I just start moving stuff around according to the chart. So you are coming back out. You need to get transferred down. Oh my god. And then 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You're 5, 6, 7. 7. So you come down. You come out, and you are 6, 5, 4, 6, 5, 4. So you come down. And you come out, and these 3 are staying here, and those 3 are staying here, and then we have 16, 17, 18. So you come down. And you come out. Okay, yes, 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 maybe, maybe. Okay, and this is, I'm just trying to reset the needles as they would be, so that one would be out. So this one would be selected. This one would be selected. Okay, now we knit. I pick up my new color. I put my carriage flaps down. We knit a row. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. And then nothing to do on row 12. Here's my test, straight off the machine. It's not doing much shaping at the moment. It's not doing much like foldy-foldy. I'm gonna bind off the edge and then remove the waist yarn and see how it behaves. And this took me about half an hour. And you'll notice a couple times I forgot to disable the white on the back. It's not the end of the world. It's just a little lumpy. And there we go, with the waist yarn removed. See if I can coerce it into shape. We're getting the chevrons. I'm gonna wash this and then steam it and then try some spray starch on it and see how it behaves before I make any more decisions. So we got a ways to go. But I think this style back works best for not having to sort out all of the issues with where even numbers of things are gonna have to be. But it does leave us with some floats on the front, which is not the end of the world. Because this is not like going to be a wearable thing. It's not going to be something with a lot of people touching it. It's going to be a display piece. So we'll do that. Let's talk about the origami. So technically this model is a flying crane and not the traditional paper crane. The traditional paper crane is very similar, but it's a little more complex. So I decided to go with this instead. And this is the model that's used in the book. And it will be a little easier to knit. So let me fold this one. And I used to do a lot of origami, but not this kind of origami. I did modular origami, which is where you fold hundreds of pieces exactly the same way, and then you fit them all together into a larger structure. And I really liked that because I never really knew how many pieces I'd need. I just had an idea of what the base pieces looked like, and then I knew what the final structure looked like, and then I just kind of went towards it, and it was fun. Which is why I have a bunch of teeny tiny origami paper, because I needed like hundreds and hundreds of sheets. There is our flying crane. Here's one I folded earlier. So what we need to do now is take this model and figure out which folds we need to knit into the final piece. And if I take one of these apart, we can see a crease pattern. But not all of these creases are important. Some of them were just used to get to the next shape, and they're not all structural to actually make the crane. And I took a crack at annotating one of these to figure out which of the creases were actually important, and I struggled a bit with that. So I did a research, and I found that crease patterns are fairly popular. Flat square diagrams that show you just the creases that are important in any given model. And then I realized that math people like origami. Because of course math people like origami, in the same way that math people like knitting. It's a bunch of patterns and repetitive motions. Of course they like it. And I found that there's a lot of software and a lot of research around the way that origami folds work. And that got me to what we're going to do with the software here. Let me show you. This is the fold repository. This is a way of specifying origami models. This is Origami Simulator, which takes those fold files and shows you what they will look like once they are fully folded up. And yes, it's doing some clipping here. Don't worry about that. This is the model that we're going to work with, and this is what it looks like flat. So once we have this, and I can get the fold files out of the simulator, we can turn it into a chart. Here is that process. This is a lot of code to process the flat file and turn it into something that we can actually knit. And this is what the chart looks like. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's helpful to model the paper as if it were of 0 width, but that is not actually the case. When it comes to origami folding, a lot of models just assume that the paper has 0 width. And for paper, that's fairly decent because you don't get folded too deeply and the actual thickness of the paper doesn't matter as much. But when we're knitting this, double bed jacquard is a lot thicker than paper. So we need to take the thickness of the knit into account when we're specifying the folds. I've already done some swatching for this and found that we leave more needles out of work to create a thicker crease. Like here's a thin crease, this is what one fold is going to be. Here's a thicker crease that's twice as wide, so that when we fold these together, we don't wind up with like a weird bunched thing. But we need to do that, figure out how deep all of these folds are so we can figure out how thick the crease needs to be and incorporate that into the knit. I did that with a lot of math and a lot of code. The inputs here are both a fully folded and a fully unfolded fold file, a default thickness for the hinge, and then a few other things, and we get this knitting diagram, where the thicker lines have more bunched up under them and the thinner lines are just plain flat folds. Here we have the beak, and this in the center is wrapped around both the head and the tail of the model, so it needs to be thicker so it'll knit nicely. And then a bunch of post-processing information. I'm going to clean up the UI of this and it'll be up on my website. And I think I'm going to open source this because I couldn't find like a closed form solution. All of this is kind of hacked together from a bunch of different algorithms. And I've kind of heavily tuned it so that it works correctly with this particular model, but I'm sure there are math people out there who have more math than I do that can find a better solution for this, and I want to make it available, so it'll be up on my GitHub. Next steps. So I've got a pile of swatches here. Some I've already treated and some I have not yet. And the ones that I haven't done anything with yet are very floppy. They are not rigid structurally. And the ones that I have treated are still a little floppy, but they are less floppy. So these will hold up better. And the way that I do that is with spray starch. And this is my big chevron one. It's doing some folding at the moment, but not a whole lot of folding, but it can be coerced to fold the way that we want it to fold. And this is the front and this is the back because I'm doing this solid back thing. So the way this works is I spray it down with the spray starch. And like fully saturate it. And then I'm ironing it on a fairly low temperature because this is acrylic and I don't want to melt it. So it's not going to fully dry when I do this, but it will get drier. And yes, I am ironing this flat even though I want it to eventually be folded, but that's just the first part of this process. Just to dry it out a bit. And then I'm going to fold it up. Make sure the folds are all the way that I want them to be. And then I'm going to iron it flat. And then I'm going to let this fully dry because it's still damp. If this were cotton or wool, I could iron it on a higher setting and fully dry it, but we're just going to let it sit because I had to saturate it to get it to do what I wanted to. Okay, all the pieces are in place. I'm going to run a small scale test. This is in the Intarsia tool on my website. Even though it's not Intarsia, it still breaks it down row by row for me so I can figure out where to do my transfers. And this has been scaled up to the gauge that I got with my samples. And then I'm just knitting an all over pattern. This is one that came with the 910 that's been digitized in AYAB, so I'm just going to work with this. I don't know what this is supposed to be. It's just like some abstract thing that's going to go over the whole paper crane. I'm on day 2 of this, and I'm not even halfway done, and it keeps dropping stitches, and oh my god, I need a different plan. I'm gonna drop it off the bed. I'm done. I'm so done. I'm so done. I need a break from this. Get that out of the way. So we can at least look at what it's gonna look like. And then maybe I need to come up with another plan for how to do this, because this is maybe too much. It's maybe too much. No, weight's off. Ugh. Now I won't even come off the bed. Fuck that. Fuck that. Oh, because I pull all the weights off. That's why it's unhappy. Oh my god, the yarns are stuck everywhere. Okay. What are you stuck on? There we go. Okay. Well, it's something. I have Chloe there. I forgot I had Chloe. Ah! So it started building the shapes of, okay, that part's good. And then that's the front. And then I tried to pick up as many stitches as I could as I went, but like it just was not working, and it became too much. Are my folds backwards? Oh, my folds are backwards. What are you even? Yeah, my folds are backwards. Okay, well that's good to know that I was knitting the whole thing backwards. My... Why are you like that? Yeah, I was knitting it backwards. Oh, come on. Oh, come on! Yeah, these folds are folding this way, but they should be folding the other way. And it's just too much. It's just too much. Oh, there's drop stitches there. There's drop stitches everywhere. Part of this is because of the kind of backing I'm doing on this with the solid color. If I were doing this with bird's eye backing, it wouldn't drop as many stitches because the tension would be more even. Oh my god, there's a drop stitch there. Maybe I'll go back and think about enforcing that even odd thing to get the bird's eye backing to work correctly. It shouldn't be too hard to do in the code now that I think about it. Oh my god. Why are you folding that way? Why are you folding that way? What are you even doing? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put this down for a while, and I'm going to work on the other project that I had going. because I need a break. Okay, I need a break. Okay, so the charts get a little gnarly, but it's not the end of the world. So here we go. I've tuned this a little more, and I think this is where it's gonna land. But I have some thoughts. So I set out to find a generic way to knit an arbitrary origami shape, and now I am deeply down this rabbit hole, tuning things specifically for my set of tools, for the machines that I have to take into account the way that vintage Brother machines do bird's eye backing on the bottom bed. And I'm wondering, like, why am I doing this? Nobody asked for this. Does anybody even care? But, like, does that matter? Does that matter that nobody cares, that nobody asked for this? Because I am having fun. I'm frustrated as hell with how the first couple of prototypes went, but I am having fun. I'm having fun applying my weirdly specific set of domain knowledge that all happens to intersect for this one project. So maybe that's all that matters. Maybe somebody will care. Okay. It's gonna be okay. So I put this project down for a while to work on something else, and I'm glad that I did, because something was really bothering me about the first quarter of this test that I was doing. It doesn't have anything to do with the way that I'm knitting the back or the fact that it was dropping stitches. It's that I thought I had been knitting it backwards. I thought I had been putting the top bed stitches on the bottom bed in reverse, because these didn't want to curve the way that I thought they would. But they're curving the way that the knit wants to curve. It just doesn't work the way that I thought it did, because I missed something big, because I didn't make enough swatches. So this is a vertical section knit entirely on the top bed, and it wants to fold this way. This is another vertical section knit just on the top bed, and it wants to fold this way. This is a chevron pattern, and it wants to fold up like this, and that's all fine. But what I failed to realize is that, hold on, let me find a swatch. This was the other project. Let me pull this off the thingy. And I really should know this, because I do so much knitting. Plain stockinette is a saddle curve. And I knew this because I do so much knitting, and I read that paper that I'll link in the description. But on the edges, it wants to curl this way, and on the top and the bottom, it wants to curl the other way. It's called a saddle curve because it looks like the way that a horse saddle is curved. It's also the same shape as a prangle. So had I done more swatching, and not just vertical samples, a horizontal sample knit entirely on the top bed would want to fold this way and not this way. And I think there's a crossover point that's probably at about 45 degrees where it's not going to want to curve at all. If you think about these sections knit on the top or the bottom bed as if they were just plain stockinette, we just have a tiny little row of stockinette that's either vertical or it has shifted over, there will be a point where it doesn't want to roll up at all, at least in this context. And I think that's at about 45 degrees, so I need to work that back into the original pattern. So the way that I figured it out is this section, which corresponds to, hold on, let me unfold one of these models so you can see. So here's the crane model that we're working with. I'm just going to unfold this real quick. So this section that I've knit right here on my test is part of the tail. We want it to fold in, and then the whole thing folds over. So these are all, what are these? These are all hill folds. Yes? Yes, they're all hill folds. But the section of the sample that I knit, we want it to fold this way, and then this way, and then in half to be the tail. But the way that it's knit in the fabric, this section wants to fold up, this section wants to fold up, this section wants to fold down. So we wind up with hill, hill, valley in this direction. And this is supposed to be the back, so this is completely reversed. I think the cutoff is 45 degrees. So past that 45 degree mark, I need to invert the folds. So we're gonna wind up with for the tail in particular, Some of these folds are going to be on the top bed, and some of them are going to be on the bottom bed, but they're all going to fold in the correct direction to make all hill folds. It gets complicated. I really wish that paper had addressed intersecting surfaces. It's non-intersecting surfaces, so just like kind of 2.5 dimensional texture and not 3-dimensional texture. But this is doable. I can fix this in the code. I just have to rethink everything. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. Bear with me while I ponder through math that I never considered I would ever touch again as an adult. I am having fun though. I really am. I want to say thank you to channel members who make videos like this possible. If you'd like to become a channel member, you can click the join button down below. All channel members get early access to new videos, and channel members of the mid-tier and higher get access to members-only videos. So a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, some projects that almost happened but didn't, some upcoming projects, but really channel members help fund the work that I do here. Getting a video to be popular enough on YouTube that it makes enough money, that it pays for itself in materials, it requires following trends and making things with broad appeal, not very specific domain knowledge and fun math. So channel members help fill in those gaps and let me make the videos that I want to make, like this one. So thank you. So go check that out if that's your thing. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting.